I'd like to now introduce our next speaker to talk about the integration of person-centered mental health and HIV services for young people, lessons learned from the IAS 2023 satellite session. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Yves Miel Zuniga, Senior Officer, United for Global Mental Health, Philippines.
Thank you, Doc Kate. Let me just share my screen. Morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Ives, and I currently lead the work on the integration of mental health into HIV and TB under United for Global Mental Health for 1.5 years. But disclosure, I'm also a homegrown in the Philippines, but I'm currently in Bangkok for a different meeting on HIV TB. I also co-founded Mental Health PH, social advocacy network in the Philippines, particularly advocating for young people's mental health. We currently have 200,000 members all over the country, and I'm happy to be one of those co-founders. So in terms of the presentation for today, we'll touch a little bit on the concepts, adding further to what our earlier speakers have shared. And then we briefly describe the analysis scope and objectives of this, what we call the landscape analysis on HIV and mental health in young people across low to middle income countries. So one of those countries covered was Philippines, but of course, we don't have per country data on it. And then the methodology as well as a little bit of results, and finally, some conclusion and recommendations. So I don't want to repeat what our earlier speakers have strongly pointed out, but just to highlight where mental health cuts across different vulnerable population and key populations, which actually include a lot of young people. When we talk about different key and vulnerable population groups. And so if we do not address the mental ill health, this could negatively impact our global targets that we've set for HIV and TB. And in the flip side, its investment could actually have a positive impact. Later on, I'll give a little bit of details on those. But why young people? Particularly because they have unique needs, and also to highlight the perspective of equity challenges. For example, currently, treatment gap for mental health issues among young people remains largely unaddressed. This could actually aggravate further our HIV treatment outcomes. So when we talk about integrating mental health into HIV and TB, how does it look like? What programmatic impact will this have? What economic impact will also look like? So how much will it cost? So on a programmatic sense, we've run a 20-year data from UNAIDS and see how will we fare by 2030 if we continue doing what we're doing in both HIV and TB. And as you can see, there's really a downward trend. There's just an uptick because of the COVID pandemic, but we're starting to catch up, and looking at that, even if without mental health, we will really do good in terms of reduction. However, this further speeds up when we start integrating mental health by as much as 10% faster. So that 10% actually translates to almost 1 million cases of HIV averted globally by year 2030. For TB, it's the same. There's also a downward trend, but by integrating mental health, we could hasten the progress by as much as 20%, which actually translate to 14 million cases of TB averted by 2030. So how much does it cost? Well, there's a widely cited economic modeling, which what we call the return of the investment on mental health across general population. For every dollar that you put for mental health programs, this actually brings you back around 5.7 or $6 by treating common mental health conditions. For HIV and TB, this is actually greater return on the investment. For HIV, it's $6.4 for every dollar that you put in on mental health programs. And on TB, it's $43, so even much more. And in the case of Philippines, for example, this does not mean that we have to start something new. We already have mental health program running. We have a dedicated mental health law. And then even during COVID-19, DOH has taken the leadership in terms of capacitating our community health workers and frontliners through MHGAP and mental health first aid. And so we just wanted to make sure that we could utilize this and tap these resources as well to address the needs of HIV and TB communities. So therefore, we would like to say that it shouldn't actually cost as much because the resources are already existing. So in terms of the focusing on the landscape analysis, the overall aim of it is to actually perform a programmatic and funding landscape on the issue of HIV in young people. And these are the specific objectives. In the interest of time, I'll just focus on the first two objectives, which actually is about synthesizing evidence on what is the latest research out there, focusing on young people, and then within these evidence, what are the different leading programmatic approaches that touch on HIV and mental health in young people. So in terms of the methodology, it's a mixed method approach. So first off, our consultant started with some literature review covering policy and guidance documents by different international organizations. What are the systematic reviews existing out there, and some technical documents and gray literature. So these were complemented by qualitative data collection through key informant interviews and survey among the Global Mental Health Action Network members, which our organization currently facilitates as secretariat, as well as our national civil society partners. So in terms of the results, we wanted to focus on the framework that the WHO has proposed. As you can see on the right side of the slide, this illustrates the different types of mental health services that could be provided in respect to the different settings. So crucially, it shows you that a large volume of need can be met through non-clinical provision, such as informal community, peer-led care and support, as well as self-care, which has both great reach, as you can see in terms of the arrow, and even low delivery cost. So it's actually in a greater sense, cost-effective, community-based mental health intervention. So the increasing breadth of the pyramid also implies that interventions shift from an individual focus in the case of the intensive treatment and mental health services on top, which need to reach a relatively very small number of people. And of course, these are what we call elevated cases already that could no longer be handled by our, for example, frontliners on the community. So as the cost actually implies, as the case with other health domains, the per person delivery cost of intensive and specialized treatment services are considerable higher than those for what we call the universal health promotion prevention efforts on the ground. So on the first level of the topmost level of the pyramid, rather, the level 1, which is your long stay facilities, specialist services, and level 2B, which is your psychiatric services in general hospitals, we note that with the existing evidence out there, it's not necessarily discussed in details in terms of how it caters to young people and with respect to HIV. And although through the key informant interviews among key low to middle income countries, we could highlight that the current financing landscape, when we talk about mental health services, there is a large proportion of domestic funding for mental health across these specialized services. So as you know, opposed to what the vision of the pyramid wanted to convey, and this is not what's happening on the ground. On the next set of pyramid intervention elements, so that's your level 2A, which is your community mental health services, level 3 mental health services through primary health care, and 4 informal community care. These are the support for people suffering mental health conditions that are provided in closer proximity so closer to us or our homes, and at the community level. And some common responses that we've noted in these evidences include the pharmacotherapy and the non-specialist delivered psychosocial services. So our community health workers, or in the case of the Philippines, the barangay health workers actually play a crucial role as well in terms of early referral, screening of not necessarily screening, but as partners to making people realize that they could be screened as well for mental health. And other forms of services include problem-solving therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, interpersonal psychotherapy, and stress management. In the case of interpersonal psychotherapy, or interpersonal counseling, there's a good case that's currently ongoing. There's a large clinical trial in South Africa, where one of those examples would be they trained a cattle breeder to perform interpersonal counseling for persons diagnosed with TB, and they've really seen a good treatment adherence among this community in a small town in South Africa. So very promising evidence, and hopefully the data could be generated soon. So the next level is on self-care. We noted that there's actually not much discussion as well on this and the existing evidence, although self-care is highlighted in the WHO's guidance for excuse me, adolescent-focused mental health interventions, and that self-care could also be very much relevant for care workers and volunteers working on HIV. In the case of Philippines, during the COVID-19, this is one of the things that our local organization, Mental Health PH, realized. And so we collaborated with different creative groups alongside psychiatrists and psychologists and public health professionals to develop what we call self-care toolkit, which we now partnered officially with Department of Health to the Health Promotion Bureau. And so these are now being shared widely across different stakeholders. So there are 2 volumes of it, and very much, the creative aspect of it was, I think, very much satisfied because we really spent time making sure that the right persona and the right language, which is quite Tagalog English in Filipino actually, in the Philippines actually, like a Taglish conversational tone, was also considered in that toolkit. So going down to the wider section of the pyramid, on the mental health promotion and preventive interventions, for us, these are what we're very strong as well, not just in terms of Philippines, but true for other low to middle income countries. And some of these interventions would include your community education on mental health, community action to reduce stigma and discrimination, and self-management skills. So unfortunately, these are just for generalized populations, and evidence for preventive interventions for adolescents living with HIV and young key population remains to be lacking. Lastly, on the most bottom part of the pyramid, that's your structural interventions. A lot of these discussions were more on the evidence part, but never discussed on the key informant interviews. But Philippines, being a, how do you call this, highly religious country and very family-centered country, these are some of the strong institutions associated to provide environment that could enable young people to build positive skills, resilience, and social cohesion, as well as reduction of social exclusion. On the flip side, it's also could be possibly reasons of increased risk toward developing mental health issues. So it's actually a double-edged sword. As someone who always get the chance to talk to young people on the ground in the Philippines through our local organization. So some conclusion and key recommendations for this landscape analysis. So first, focusing on the epidemiology. Although there is evidence to justify strong action on mental health and HIV in young people, evidence-based remains to be weak when it comes to the situation of young adults. And so furthermore, to those who are particularly at risk of HIV. So some recommendation, we call on different actors to enhance the range of mental health conditions covered in research, because a lot of times these are only covering depression, anxiety, to some extent. So it doesn't cover any other cases of mental health illnesses such as schizophrenia. We should also call on for research to allow for disaggregation of findings according to different subcategories of young people. Why? Because when we talk about young people, this still covers your under 25, but a lot of times your 18 to 25 would always be subsumed across adult population. But to be honest, this specific group also have their different unique needs, and so intervention should be tailored according to their unique needs. And of course, the routine collection of data is always a challenge. It's not just for the case of Philippines, but low to middle income countries. Number one, due to lack of resources, enough resources. Number two, we don't have also enough capacitated workforce to begin with. Especially for mental health. In the Philippines, we only have like less than 1,000 specialists or licensed professionals to cater to 110 million population. So that's always been a challenge in terms of the shortage. Second point, on the programming on mental health among young people affected by HIV, the programmatic evidence base provides sufficient information to improve current programming. However, there's still the lack of specificity, as I highlighted earlier, that in terms of young people and in terms of specific subpopulation within young people, you have transgender groups, you have young adolescents and women, you have persons who use drugs, men having sex with men, sex workers, etc. And so it gives us limitation in terms of having precise course of action to take in different contexts. So some recommendations could be, hopefully, next generation of guidance documents should aim to more or less provide what we call decision trees for different contexts. So there's some aspect of health technology assessment skills or processes to help us, which is actually good in the Philippines because HTA has been gaining traction and it's a very considerable aspect of universal health law. Lastly, on multidirectional awareness, it's very much needed. Why? In the case of Philippines, we are a highly decentralized country. Basically, the health programs could only penetrate so much from the National Ministry of Health or the Department of Health down to the region, and from the region down to the communities. Basically, health lies at the mercy of our local chief executive. So there's very much needed for us to make sure that our politicians or these key decision makers are well informed in terms of why the need for greater investment on mental health, why the need to prioritize young people. Lastly, on the advocacy and funding for mental health among young people affected by HIV, even outside this particular focus, in terms of the need of young people with respect to HIV, mental health actually remains critically under-resourced. And so we need to continue for greater prioritization of mental health over. And the focus, in the case of the Philippines, the focus should be on the gradual shifting from very institutionalized funding on mental health. Currently, that's the case, to more community-based approach to investment of mental health. So if you want to access the report, you may access the executive summary of the landscape analysis using this QR code. I'm more than happy to share the slides, especially for our participants today. But other than the landscape analysis, before I finally end this presentation, just quickly sharing some examples of useful resources when we talk about integrating mental health into HIV and TB services. So we collaborated with the Global Fund to actually come up with an e-learning module, which was just recently launched months ago. This is particularly geared toward national actors, your country coordinating mechanisms, your health programs from the Department of Health, and even your program implementers down the community to be further briefed around integrating mental health into existing disease programs such as HIV and TB. So this is the QR code to access the iLearn. This would also include a very brief video, like 2 to 3 minutes of the presentation I gave earlier on the conceptual part of why integrating mental health into HIV and TB is important, and the bending the curve statistics. Another useful resource is the technical toolbox that we actually disseminated among our national partners. So these includes your different fact sheets on the relationship between HIV and TB, and some consolidated annotated bibliography summarizing existing normative guidances produced by international organizations. And further adding the human side of it, we also added some case studies to demonstrate the how of the integration. So there are case studies from Vietnam, from Zimbabwe, from Pakistan. Hopefully the Philippines would contribute a story of its own as well, as the technical toolbox is a living document of its own. Some other useful resources, just wanted to highlight that recently WHO has released an operational handbook on tuberculosis and mental health, and this was also complemented with an e-learning module, which was just launched last month actually. So thank you very much for listening. If you want to hear more about our work, you can visit us at unitedgmh.org, or even join us at the Global Mental Health Action Network. I don't want to preempt, but there might be a new working group that would be launched within the network called the LGBTQIA+ network, and of course HIV, TB, and mental health would be very much a hot topic within that group. So we look forward for you to join us in that network, especially our researchers and academicians and even program implementers. Thank you very much for this invitation, and have a great day.